honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Sons and Union Veterans of the Civil War, I wish to thank you for coming today. We are here today to honor and forever mark the resting place of the last Civil War soldier of Washington County. As noting worthy of merit can be accomplished without divine guidance, I ask you to bow your heads. Chaplain.
Superior ruler of the universe, God of battle and of peace, we thank you for this day and hour, for this blessed privilege of meeting here as sons and soldiers to pay homage to the nation's dead. We thank thee that in the day of trouble and the hour of danger, that thou in thy infinite wisdom raised up men who were ready to do battle, and if need be, to die so this country might be preserved. Grant us, we beseech thee, a continuance of thy watchful care. Grant thy blessings upon those sacred ceremonies consecrated as they are to the memory of brave and loyal hearts who dared stand for the right and were not afraid to bare their breasts to the storm of steel in defense of human liberty, a united country, and a brotherhood of man. Bless our country, preserve it in purity and integrity. Through his name, amen.
The reason we assembled today is best explained by past Commander-in-Chief Pierre Lafouche when he addressed the last encampment of the Grand Army of the Republic in 1949. He said in part, the records of 300 fighting regiments show that of their number, 1 in 3 was either killed or wounded. They stood at Antietam. They faced the heights of Donelson and Fredericksburg and stood among the cedars at Stones River, met the fearful shock at Shiloh, became granite columns at the rocks of Chickamauga, formed a living wall against treason's mightiest powers at Gettysburg, moved unfalteringly in the slaughter pens of Cold Harbor, and climbed up to rocky precipices and mountainsides to the portals of glory on Lookout, Kennesaw, and Mission Ridge. Can we comprehend the loss of human life? Even that comprehension will be but a dim picture of the reality unless our imagination be vivid enough to fill all its lines and spaces with privation and suffering. Unless we can call up the summer's tempest and winter's sleet, unless we can behold them fording streams and battling alike with the enemy, iced and swift currents, marching day after day through swamps, standing on the lonely picket post until too weary to even be wakeful, unless we can behold the gaunt starvation making hollow the cheek and dimming the light of the eye, unless we can see the long lines of shroudless bodies and hear the pitiful cry for water and the prayer for succor, I believe our imagination will come far short of reality. It was the privation, wounds and death there. It was the suspense, loneliness and suffering here. The roar of cannon and the crash of musketry on the plains and forests of the Southland were echoed by the cries of the orphans and wail of the widow amidst the vales and hills of the Northland. The blare of trumpets and the bugle-sounding charge yonder became the dry lamentation and the funeral dirge here. The outlay was not alone shattered limbs and wasted forms, but desolate hopes, ruined homes, and broken hearts. Not alone the piled dead yonder, but the sacrifice and sorrow worse than death itself. In the shadow of 500,000 graves, in the daily presence of those who that returned diseased and broken down, with liberty still vocal with the echo of suffering, with the memories of Belle Isle, Salisbury, Millen, and Andersonville lighted as though with lurid fires of hell, standing under the clouds of grief that darkened 500,000 homes, we proclaim a roll of honor of the Grand Army of the Republic. That roll was made and completed in days of old. It was written with the red blood from human hearts, its letters more bright and more precious than were they writ in the purest gold. and they were effaceably burned on the pages of life. Therefore, we, the sons of Union veterans of the Civil War, gather at this memorial in sacred memory of our fathers and their sacrifices. If I may be so bold as to quote from the epitaph of another place and time, tell them of us and say, for their tomorrow we gave today. As all the veterans here gathered are aware, a soldier cannot leave his post without being properly relieved. Private Copper, you are now relieved. I have the post. Rest in peace.
John Copper is the last soldier of Washington County. He was born in Bavaria, Germany on May 17th, March 1848. He enlisted as a private in Company K of the 11th Wisconsin Infantry Volunteer Regiment of the Union Army. Would you had some words you'd like to say?
Well, just about what you just said. My grandfather was born there in Germany. They came and immigrated to the United States when he was 7 years old. And his parents were John and Johann and Elizabeth. They settled in St. Lawrence when he was 14. His father they farmed, as most of the Germans did when they were up here. Because there were no computers, TVs, or radios, I'm sure the army or the war looked like a great adventure to a young man, even though he didn't know anything about war. He ran away at age 17 down to Milwaukee to join the Union Army. His father found out about it and went down to bring him back home. They convinced him that he was only 17 and could not join the Army. So he brought him back to the farm here at St. Lawrence. That lasted for a couple of weeks. He then went to Fond du Lac County, and in Lemira, he joined the Union Army under the name of John Herman. He couldn't use Cowper because his father would have found him, so he used an alias to get in. He was put in the 11th Brigade K Company, and I was told 2 weeks into his training he broke his leg. I cannot prove that, but that's the story I always heard when I was a young man. He stayed with the Army for 6 months. The war ended while he was in. And while he was down in Mobile, Alabama, they released him of his duties, along with a lot of other men. Because at that time, there were so many men in the Army, in the service, they had to feed them, clothe them, and house them. And I'm sure that was one way for the Army to lower their costs, release a lot of them to go back home. He married Agnes Marie Ruffenfuss in 1873 in St. Lawrence. They farmed and had 8 children, with Frank Cowper the eldest. Frank was my and Sonny's grandfather. Grandfather. John was my great-grandfather. That's my fault, don't worry about it. We've been working on this for a little while. It kind of came up quite suddenly because of Tony. Where's Tony? Tony go away? Did Tony hide? There's Tony. There, yeah. Okay. John died at the age of 91. He was living in Illinois at the time. I was told that his favorite holiday was Memorial Day. He would, I'm sure, march with the rest of the Civil War veterans and World War I veterans on that day. But when his wife passed away in '33, he moved down with his daughter in Illinois. When he reached the age of 1937, he became very ill, so he never came back up here again. In 1939, he passed away, and because he wanted to be buried next to his wife, the services were held at St. Lawrence, and the interment was here. He was an avid member of the GAR Post 165 in Hartford, and was active in the GAR until the last few years of his life. And he was proud of his service and his country. And I never met the gentleman, and we really didn't have many stories about him. So that's about all I can tell you. Thank you.
Pretty good stories, all things considered. if you'd like to go see, oh, yeah, so we need to do that.
Yes, we have to do this.
All right.